about animating your sprites. So before you want to start, you should add your animation start and animation end indexes for your running animation and any other like jumping animations, that kind of thing that you have. In my project, my assets folder, if I open up my sprites PNG, for my Mario player, you can see that for the running, I only have four sprites. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's why in the constants, it starts at 1 and ends at 4. Okay, so then after you've done that, you should add these variables to the player class. So this animation bracket texture region is going to be your it's kind of like an array of texture regions that make up an animation, and this object's called animation, and you can call it, and it's going to be for your running animation because I'm assuming all of you at least have a running animation. And for me, my jump animation is only 1 frame, so I'm just going to have a texture region. But if you guys have a actual animation for your jump, then you can make this a texture region as well. Then you want to add in a previous state and a state timer. So previous state, like current state, it tracks the state, but instead of tracking what's the state is currently, it tracks the one before. And this is useful. We're going to use it to see like if a player is falling compared to jumping. Yeah, so because there's different animations for that. State timer tracks what index your animation is currently on. So if it's on frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, and it tracks it based on a float timer. The final thing is you want to add falling, jumping, and running to your animation. If you don't have a falling state, or a falling state isn't important, then you don't have to add it, but I'm sure you guys all have a jumping and running state to add. Okay, so now to initialize your previous state and your state timer here. So for previous state, when you first create the player, the previous state is going to be standing because obviously your player hasn't done anything yet. And the state timer can start at 0 because that's, your animation starts at 0. The next thing you want to do is to create a texture region. So this. This texture region called frames will hold this array of texture regions will hold the different textures for each animation that you have. Since this game only has one, it'll only ever hold frames for the run animation, but you might want to have a jumping animation or something else as well, and that's why you can reuse this array and clear it once you finish adding it to your animation object. So to add your frames to the texture region, or to your animation object, you want to create a for loop that loops through your beginning index and your end index. And then in between this for loop, you want to add, let me show you the whole thing, frames.add, create a new texture region, so a new frame, and you get it from your screen's atlas by finding the region, and in here you want to pass in your player string name. It might not be called Little Mario string because you might not be making a Mario game. Maybe it's just called player string. And for these indexes, it's x, y, width, and height. But since we're running through it with a constant, every time the constant updates, essentially, it'll move. So essentially, it'll start here, and it'll take this frame. And as you progress through the for loop, it'll index it by like 2, and then it's 16 pixels times 2. So it'll take the second one, this one, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Okay, and then add your frames to your animation object, and also pass in a frame duration. So this is how long each frame lasts for. After that, you want to clear it in case you want to reuse this array. And I'm also going to set my jump animation, or my jump texture here. So one other way you can pass in your textures without a for loop is that you simply call it using whatever index it's at. So for example, this the jump animation here starts at 80, apparently 80 pixels, and you can just pass in 80 and then it'll take like that particular texture region. And you can do this for each one and just like copy and paste this line. So frames.add new texture region instead of doing it like a for loop, but this seems to be a little cleaner if you can. Afterwards, you should go to your getFrame method and add this. So you want to add jumping and running and, well, I'm not going to add falling for now, but jumping and running, because when you're jumping, since the texture region is only like one texture region, you can just set this region to a jump. But if you're running, you want to get the frame of your run animation by passing in the current state timer, so what index it's at, and you want to ask if it's like if the animation is looping or not. So after it gets to the end of your animation, will it start over? So that's essentially what the looping boolean is for. Remember to add your breaks after your case, and that should be it for this. Final thing is you want to check this. So essentially what this if statement is for is if the current state is equal to the previous state, so the state hasn't changed yet, then you want to add time to your state timer. Otherwise, if it's a new animation, you obviously want to start the animation at frame 0. So if the state changed, then set your state timer to 0. After that, set your previous state equals to your current state, so you can continue the thing. Alright, finally in your get state, previously we only had this line, but now since we have other states, we want to check like which one it is so we can return. To check jumping, you want to see if your player's body is moving in a y direction. So if it's moving in a y direction, then it's currently jumping, because obviously like to go into the air you have to jump. And then or if it's moving in a y direction that's negative and the previous state was jumping. So it started to jump and now it's falling in the y direction. But the previous state was also jumping, so that means he's just finishing his parabola for his jump. For the falling state, if you have one, just check if the falling state is less than 0. So like essentially like this. So if he's falling. For running, you just want to see if he's moving in either direction along the x-axis, because that means he's moving around and not staying still. And that should be it. And if you run your project, you should see your Mario player, or your player being activated or being animated.